Managing people doesn't have to be scary. Whether you struggle with hiring or firing employees, developing individuals or teams, or even managing workplace relationships, I have some answers that can help you establish your approach. I'm Phil Badley, a leadership coach who helps business owners to lead better and more productive lives. I've developed some great content aimed at small businesses that want to focus on improving their performance. Now, the context is set in the therapy sector, although the principles I'm sharing are the same regardless of the business that you're running. I hope they can help you with a challenge that you're facing. So why not take a look and see how my tips can help you to improve your approach to managing people. Appraisals. Love them or hate them. In this session we're going to look at a straightforward approach to improving performance. But let's be frank, why bother? Managers hate them. They take lots of time, effort, they're often quite uncomfortable. And where you have to rate employees from poor to high performance, that can be even more complicated because in truth it's fairly subjective and can cause a lot of disquiet, not only for you as a manager but also for your team. And let's not forget the paperwork. I've worked in organisations where there have been 50 pages of content, so it becomes a really heavy process and kind of loses the impact of appraisal. So we're going to talk about how to make a good appraisal process. The risk is, of course, that employees also think that it's unfair and unhelpful, because if we manage the process poorly, then actually it becomes done to rather than done with. I can remember times in my own experience where I've sat in appraisals, being appraised, where I've thought, what on earth is my boss thinking? His view, very often different to my team and my peers and the customers I was serving, because he saw a very different angle to me than actually how my team and customers did. So something to bear in mind. Bureaucracy, we've already talked about too much paper, and that kind of roll it forward. I've also been in settings where we think, okay, well, we'll set a target for this year, and at the end of the year, maybe we didn't make it. So we go, I'll tell you what, let's just roll it all forward. So it becomes a fairly pointless exercise. So why would you bother? Well, the reason you'd bother is because you're missing a huge opportunity within your clinic. It provides a focus and a direction to people's work. It can help improve performance. It can help improve your skills base within your organisation, which will help you prepare for business growth. It helps you to engage with your team members. It helps you to hear their goals and their ambitions. So why might you be listening in and looking at this video today? What might your interest in appraisal be? Or perhaps you've got a process in place already and you want to improve it. Or maybe you don't currently have an approach and you're wondering where to start. Or perhaps you're sitting on the fence and thinking, should I have one? Should I not have one? Some of you may have performance issues within your business and you're wanting to find a solution. Most of us in our lifetime will have been appraised, formally or informally. So that bias from that experience will taint in some way the way we view an appraisal process. And let's face it, it's not all good. We're going to cover some hints and some tips about the approach and the process. So what are we going to cover in this video? Well, we already started with why bother. We're going to define appraisal. We're going to dip into your business plan, but don't panic, not too serious. We're going to look at a typical appraisal process. We're going to think about the importance of preparation time, and we're going to give you some hints and tips. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the resources that are also available on this platform. So let's get going. So let's return to why for a moment. So understanding performance is vital to the success of your clinic. Your team is critically important to the success, not only in terms of your clinic, your own performance and peer performance within the business. Encouraging an environment where learning and improvement is embedded will actually help business growth. Giving colleagues responsibility and holding them to account for their actions is a fundamental part of good organisational performance. Encouraging collective learning about what works and what needs to change is key. Encouraging and reflecting upon personal impact, the individual contribution, the motivation of an individual, their well-being and their potential are the bedrock of a high-performing appraisal and performance management system. So in effect, you're building the future capability of your business. So let's just return to appraisal. What does it mean? Well, in a literal sense, appraisal means the act of examining someone or something in order to judge their qualities, success, or needs. So if you think as human beings, we do this constantly to survive. We have subconscious routines. We breathe. I have an automatic routine for getting up in the morning, which sometimes means I forget to have a shave because it's a sub-routine. It becomes a habit. We have the fight or flight mechanism within us, which comes back from days in the wild where we'd see something alarming and think, is it going to kill me or am I going to kill it? So all of these instincts are there. And my favourite perhaps is Marmite, because Marmites are kind of a love or a hate relationship. And these are all the fundamental parts of how we appraise and how we understand what we like and what we don't like. So just think for a moment about your role as a clinician. And I want you to think and reflect upon the similar appraisal techniques that you'll use when assessing a client. Because a good initial consultation, a good diagnosis, is the basis of performance for appraisal. So how does that map into employee appraisal? Well, that's simply a development in terms of a formal structure or a meeting between an employee and their manager. We're going to look at progress, aims, and needs for future work. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, let's just stop for a moment to think about what appraisal is not. It's not a one-way conversation. I've had to sit down and listen to my boss talking to me for virtually all of my appraisal without giving me the opportunity to engage in dialogue. It's not a one-way conversation. It's not a rant either. Believe me, I've been on the end of one or two rants in my career, but thankfully learned from the experience and never ranted when I was the boss in an appraisal. So it is not the time to get something off your chest. That's a different mechanism and a different conversation. It's also not time to pick holes in history. You know that issue we had 6 months ago that you didn't deal with very well, that I chose not to tell you about then, but I'm going to bring it up in your appraisal now? Really, really not helpful, but it happens an awful lot and causes grievances and upset. So let's not do that. While sharing opinions has a relevance and importance, it's much better to deal with facts and data. They form the basis of much stronger and informative conversations. And my final what it's not is a social chat. Now, very often managers and employees can feel uncomfortable about sitting in a structured, formal performance meeting. So the manager will collude, bring a cup of tea in, make it all touchy-feely, make it all comfortable, and have a really unstructured conversation that leaves neither party any clearer about how they were, how they are, and where they need to be. So let's stop for a minute and just think about what a good appraisal process will allow for. Preparation is absolutely critical for both you as a manager and the person that you're appraising. Reflection time is really important. So thinking about the period since the last conversation. There's also an important balance between the past and the future. Too many appraisals focus on the past. We really want to be focusing on performance and future and intended performance. We need it to be engaging. It's a two-way conversation. For that, as a manager, you need good interpersonal skills. Now, they're not the subject of today's piece, but you'll find them elsewhere on this site. Above all, it's an agreement about future goals and performance. And we'll return to the process again in a little more detail a little bit later on in this session. So let's look at approaches to appraisal. There are many different types of approaches. You might be doing it once a year. It might be very formal, very structured, very process driven. You might be setting goals once a year and then having periodic reviews, maybe half yearly or quarterly. You might be doing quarterly or monthly. You might be choosing to have annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly and daily. And that brings me to something that I like to refer of as Sunday lunch or a Kit Kat conversation. And this was given to me quite a few years ago now by a senior manager in an organisation who was explaining the difference between the two. So if you just visualise Sunday lunch, so think of the preparation time, the cooking time, setting the table, sitting down, maybe going through 1, 2, possibly 3 courses and feeling quite full and satisfied at the end of it. Think about a Kit Kat break. So what do we mean by a Kit Kat break? Well, that's grabbing a cup of coffee, a quick 5 minutes, maybe have a piece of chocolate, reboost the energy and off we go again. How does that relate to appraisal? Well, formal appraisal systems can look like Sunday lunch. What employees really strive for are Kit Kat conversations. They're here and now, in the moment conversations where you might choose to take somebody aside and say, Ali, that was a great piece of work. What I particularly liked about it was A, B and C. What I thought you did really well was F. What would be great if you could concentrate on Z a little bit more, and that would be absolutely perfect. And what's more, how can I help you with Z? Kit Kat. Suddenly, you've got movement, inertia in that performance conversation. So thinking about goals and objectives is really important. Some of them are going to be longer term, where you might need data over time actually to evidence whether or not anything is changing, whether anything your employees are doing in relation to their goals are making a difference. That might be client journey. Perhaps you're trying to move client journey from 1.2 to 4. Ideally, you'd be looking at 6 or above. But that's not going to happen in the moment. But then there are short-term goals where you would expect to see change almost instantaneously. So somebody's behaviour might be a good example of that, where having had a conversation about it, you'd want somebody to be rehearsing, practicing and demonstrating that they were serious and they'd move forward. So for me, that's what I would think of as a bit like an ACL recovery plan. You need to map it, and then you need to look for short-term gains, longer-term opportunities. At the end of the day, how you run your appraisal process in your clinic is up to you, because what matters is what works within your business. At the start, I said we needed to look a little bit at the business plan. Now, hopefully you've got one. If you haven't, it's not the end of the world. There are resources elsewhere on this platform that can help you. If you have a structured business plan, that's great. If you don't at the moment, just think about the high-level things that you're seeking to do, to achieve in your clinic at the moment, in terms of customers, in terms of employment relationships, in terms of marketing, in terms of sales. Think about that current plan. Now reflect upon the employee, the employees that you've got within your organisation, and think about them, and think about their contribution to that business performance. What data have you got existing within your organisation that will help you to better understand how they relate as an employee within your business? What clinical performance looks like? What client relationships look like in the business? How good are they at business development, or selling additional services, or passing off to colleagues within the business to help them get the help and support they need to get recovery? Are they good revenue generators? What are they like at sales? Are they good at retaining clients? What's gone well? What's not gone so well? What have you been learning as their manager about how well they perform. What needs to be done differently? How do you relate their current knowledge and understanding about the role that they're performing? If you think of a clinician, they could be excellent technically, but perhaps not so strong on the interpersonal side. Hopefully not the other way around. But actually having data to help you make informed decisions about where they need to develop and the support you need is really important. Then think about making some questions, make some notes. Think about the questions you might want to ask them as you prepare for that process. Now think about future plans in terms of your business. What's your business focus? How are roles going to develop or change? What development opportunities are there within the business, both in terms of product lines and services, and also the employees that are working for you? What do you need from each team member? What do you want them to focus on in the next year? And even better, in the next quarter to get you to the end of the next year? What goals will you want them to set? How will you measure the contribution over time to know that you're getting the kind of outcomes that you want? You also need to be mindful of the individuals themselves. Stephen Covey came up with a very simple circular model that talks about comfort, stretch, and panic. Think of comfort as your favourite armchair. You feel very, very settled in it, very comfortable. You don't really want to move out of it. So if you're setting objectives and goals that feel like the person is sat in that comfortable chair, then you're not really going to get traction. Stretch, on the other hand, and of course working in clinics we know all about the importance of stretch, strength and conditioning, puts you into a growth zone. So it'll get you out of that comfort zone and into a learning and a growth zone. That's the right place to be. Panic is that step too far. Maybe you're doing too much exercise or carrying too much weight or pushing too hard to get a personal best. So if you think about that in a sporting analogy and then bring that back into goal setting for your team, people don't want to be in panic because it's an uncomfortable place to be, and as we know in physiological terms can be quite damaging to individuals, in the same sense in a business setting. So don't stay in panic for too long. If you notice people are panicking because the goals you've set, then think about measuring them, remeasuring them and resetting them. Think about the skills and knowledge they'll need for the future and the experience they'll need to gain to help you and your business get to where you want to be. How capable are they already? What support might you need to give them? Let's just return to preparation. And I think about prior preparation prevents, I'll call it poor performance. That's an army term that's slightly in the vernacular, but we'll keep it clean on this video. Too often, managers rush in. They don't prepare. Maybe you're trying to squeeze these conversations between appointments. Poor preparation. Think about how it makes you feel if you're on the receiving end of that. And I, in my own experience, have been on the receiving end of people dashing into appraisals where I'm feeling really quite buoyed up. I've done my homework and my boss runs in 10 minutes late, says, I'm really sorry, can we get this done in half an hour? And instantly I'm feeling demotivated and I'm thinking, what is the point? This is just, people are paying lip service to this. You don't want a system, you don't want to afford, you cannot afford not to be prepared. How well do you understand your own appraisal process? Now you're going to develop that, or you've got it developed and you know how well it works. But how comfortable are you with that process? If you're not, get comfortable. How well do you know the employees and how well do you know whether or not they understand the process that you're putting them through? Are you allowing them to feel prepared? Are you allowing them to get engaged? What skills do you need to develop in yourself to be more effective in appraisal? Then spend a moment thinking about the timing of it. The timing of it in the calendar in terms of the season, the timing of it in terms of the day, and maybe even the time of day. Think about the environment in which you're going to hold these one-to-ones. Begin with the end in mind Actually, what do you want to achieve and what will good look like? And how do you create the environment that will give you the best opportunity for that? Think about what good questions look like. And again, there are more resources to help you with that. Think about skills around listening, summarising and responding. Very often we listen to respond rather than to listen to understand. And in an appraisal setting, listening to understand is critically important.